Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Baschamania podcast. This is episode 183, and it is brought to you by our great friends at Attack. Champions aren't born, they're made. Attack is a training app for athletes. They're here to help you level up. Guys, I've been talking about Attack since the minute they launched their app, and I love this thing. And if you're not following them on social, you're missing out because they just continue to elevate their game. Download the Attack app, ATAC, and you can level up your training with nutrition, with mentality stuff, with workouts, with training, you name it. Attack is here to help you level up. Download the Attack app, ATAC, and follow them on social. They're Attack, ATAC.app. Kollin, we have two directions we can go right out of the gate. We can talk wrestling, or we can just talk Bills Browns. I mean, it is Combine week.
This is my off time of the year where I try not to remember that the Browns exist to give my mental state a break a little
But
bit.
you're a big baseball guy too, right? Tribes fan?
Yeah, I honestly I wish I followed it a little bit better. But yeah, I love the Tribe.
Yeah, it's always funny. Like, you and I started following each other years ago on Twitter, and it's always funny when you connect with the people that wrestling is like the second or third thing you tweet about the most. Like, I feel like we're always going back and forth with football and this and that. So it's
Yeah.
been fun. This episode is kind of overdue. Been wanting to have you on for a while, and I always try to have people on when it makes the most sense for them, get their story out there more. And between Big Ten's this weekend, you're a three-time Big Ten champ, your two ranking series win, I figured now is as good as time as ever. Let's start right off with those ranking series trips, because you looked phenomenal. You won in Croatia early February. You won in Egypt last week. How are those trips for you?
And they were awesome. I hadn't competed since like Final X, way back in June. So it had been probably almost 6 months, 7 months since I had stepped on the mat in competition. So that was interesting. I felt just like very excited to finally like get back out on the mat and wrestle.
Yeah, you had to be itching.
And yeah. And then I saw my draw, and I had I think Nurmagomedov. I think that's his name. The first match, he was a
Yeah.
bronze medalist last year. So I was like, all right, cool. Like first
Right.
match in 6 months. Like, all right, world bronze medalist, let's do it. But Croatia was awesome. It was a really smooth trip. The city was cool, and really all you can ask for on those trips is the hotel good and is the food good. So if those two things are good, then that's all I care
How
about,
much of
really.
the trip are you able to actually enjoy? Like, it's cool. I saw some of you guys went to the pyramids and stuff. Like, it's got to be like a blessing and a curse, because it's so cool to go to somewhere like that. But it's also a business trip. Like, Chenzo was initially going to be on this episode, and he just got back. He's like sick right away. I'm like, yeah, dude, like, you flew to Egypt to wrestle a few matches, flew across the world home. Like, that's a lot, but it is still cool. I got to imagine, to be able to do some of those things even in a compressed time frame.
Yeah, it's awesome. So like in Croatia, we got there, I think maybe 5 or 6 days before I competed. So the first like day or two is really when you get to like go explore. You don't want to do like too much, but if there's anything to see, you go walk around. And that was a nice part about it too, was we were right in the city, so everything was within like a 20-minute walk.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to like get in a car. Or Egypt, to go see the pyramids, or even going to Alexandria. Alexandria was 30 minutes away from our hotel. So like even to go see stuff there
Yeah.
was an all day thing. So but you can't just sit in the hotel room all day, or you'll kind of lose your
Right.
mind. so
Right.
so it's just finding that balance of like going out and exploring, but not overdoing it. And so by the time competition comes around, you're like too tired, and don't feel like excited and like ready to go do something. So the first 2 days I usually go out and explore, and then leading up to it, probably 2 days before, I kind of just lock myself down. So I feel like really excited just to like get out of the hotel room and go compete.
How long are those flights to Egypt?
They were brutal. I think we went from Chicago to Istanbul, which was like a 10-hour flight on the way there and 11-hour flight on the way back.
Dude, I don't know how you do it. Like, I'm the same quote unquote size as you, like 6 foot, just over 200 pounds. Obviously, our builds are very different. You're in shape, I'm not. But being 6 foot, 200 pounds, like, and being on a plane for a while is not the easiest thing just for an everyday person, let alone when you're using your body and you're going over there to compete. Like, what is that like when you get off the plane? I got to imagine your body's like sore just from the travel.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot out of you. And hopefully, there's not a lot of people on the flight. So sometimes you get lucky and you get your own row.
Yeah.
That was not the case on the Egypt flight. So that was that was kind of brutal. But the hardest part is just timing up your sleep, honestly. Because I left Tuesday night and I got into Alexandria Thursday morning at like 4 a.m.
Dang.
So it was right around like 20, 28, 26 hours of travel total. So you just kind of try and time up your sleep at local time wherever you're competing, and then just try and grind through it on the planes.
I'd be passing out left and right on the plane. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, I never really thought about trying to force yourself to stay awake on a plane because you got to time your sleep the right way.
yeah. It's a little bit of a science, and sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes it doesn't work out, and then you end up, just basically like sleep whenever you can
Yeah.
overseas. But luckily, I've been adjusting really well whenever I go over there. So that's been nice. But Egypt, yeah, we got over there Thursday and wrestled Sunday, so it was kind of a shorter trip
Yeah.
um, to adjust time wise. Which it just really depends on what you like. So I like getting there earlier and having enough time to adjust and like um, just I want to feel like a little pimped up and ready to go
Because I know for
wrestle.
Worlds and Olympics, you obviously have like whole acclimation camps and everything else. But for like this, you don't do that. You guys kind of skip that phase.
No, so yeah, these we don't do that. You're just there for like 5 days usually, 5 or 6 days. But sometimes it is nice to just get over there. You have like 2 days to get ready, and then you go compete, and it's quick,
Yeah.
and you're just like there to the point. And it was nice I didn't fly out till Tuesday morning. So the Monday after I competed is when I got to go down to Cairo and see the pyramids, and I didn't have to worry about, feeling stressed out about competition and stuff like that. So it worked out.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you are back at 92 this year, which, if I remember correctly, 2020, you were, well, 2021, I guess, Olympics. You were obviously up at 97, came back down to 92, or came down to 92 for 2020. What was it? One World Championships. And then last year, 97, now 92. How has that been like trying to hone in on that weight? Obviously, some years you don't have as much of a choice as others.
Yeah. So, I mean, ideally, you want to be at an Olympic weight.
Yep.
It just makes more sense. If you make that team in medal, it's a lot easier process to make the Olympic team. So I was trying to stay at 97, which I feel comfortable, really comfortable at both weights. They're close enough, and there's enough time in between competitions where you can get up and down pretty easily. But with Jaden going up to 97 this year, 92 seemed like the way to go. Instead of trying to go through Jaden and Kyle, I might as well just go and see if I can make a world team, when I can.
Yep.
Or what's kind of an easier weight in medal, and then maybe sit in the semis at Olympic trials instead of trying to go through that gauntlet 2 years in a row.
They should definitely just nix this whole thing, make it 8 weights. 8 weights for the whole cycle instead of this 10 to 6, 10 to 6. Because it is interesting too. Like, you have these like years like this where the Olympic weights look so different than the non-Olympic weights. And I imagine for you, I mean, you're more comfortable at either one, but it's funny because looking through your career, the last 2 years, your only domestic losses are to world and Olympic champs and medalists, Snyder and Cox. And
Yeah.
even we'll talk college in a little bit, but even the final 2 years of your college career, you only lost to Bo, your junior, didn't lose your senior year. So it's like you're seeing more than I think a lot of people the depth of this country. And
Yeah.
as a fan, I think depth is really fun and it's great for marketing. When you try to market Spencer Lee versus somebody, it's very hard. It's just about Spencer.
Yeah.
When you market two guys who's going to make the team, that's great for the sport. But as an athlete, like, it's funny, you start seeing some people look back, like I forgot who it just was whose NCAA career was like they wrestled Dake 1 year, Burles 1 year. Forgot who it was, but like, you look back and you see what's that?
Tyler Caldwell, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Those guys. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, like looking back, it's crazy. You don't even need that time to see the guys around you and their talent. But what is your perspective when you are in that position where you have these guys? It's not like, I feel like if it was a guy who is on the same level as you accolade wise, that's one thing. You've got some of the best to ever do it in your weight. What is the perspective like being in a weight like that?
I think the cool thing about it is basically you feel really confident that if you win that weight, you can win or medal at Worlds. I mean, there's some weights where we medal maybe 1 year, maybe we don't. But if you're making the team at that weight and you're beating a 7-time medalist and a 4-time world champ, Olympic champ, you got to feel really confident going into that world championships or Olympics being like, I can do this. Like I can medal. Like I have a legitimate shot. Which I feel like most guys feel anyways, but it does give like extra set of confidence. Like if I beat this guy, there's a good chance that I can take it home at the Worlds or Olympics. So that's kind of the thought process on it.
And it's funny you say that because it's like, as I get more and more relationships in the sport and I get even more of a look behind the curtain, it's like some of these guys their hardest match is potentially here at the States to make the team. You talk about a weight like 97, where you got to go through the gauntlet of guys like Snyder and Cox. You go through 74, Burroughs and Dake. Like some of these guys, like Chenzo, wants to make the Olympic team at 74. You got to beat Olympic and world champs just to make our team. But if you do that, who can't you beat? That's the crazy thing. Do you think that the depth we're seeing now is why we're seeing so many guys compete for other countries? It seems like that trend is, on the rise. Like I put out content all the time with like who's competing and Americans competing. And I usually get that from USA Wrestling, from people telling me. And I'm always like, well, I don't really exclude these other people who are, I'll all of a sudden see Ben Hannes competing for Italy, Sebastian Rivera competing from Puerto Rico, Micic competing for Serbia. Like you see all these people, and it seems like that trend is growing more and more. And talking to some of the guys, it sounds like even more want to try to do that next year.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I totally get why they're doing that, and I think the depth is so crazy right now that you could have multiple guys from America have the potential to medal and win the world championships. So instead of trying to peak twice in a year for, the trial, or maybe even 3 times for the trials and then Final X, and then again in 2 months at Worlds, I think people are just starting to realize like, I'll just go wrestle for a different country, make the team pretty easy. And then I just have to peak and compete really well at the world championships. And instead of wrestling this guy 2 or 3 times to make the team and then Worlds, I'll just do it at Worlds.
Yeah.
And see it roll it out.
And it's funny because, like, in Egypt, Chenzo's wrestling Anthony Valencia, his teammate in Arizona. But it's like on paper, it's
the same side.
Yeah, it's like USA versus Mexico in the like it was either prelim or eighth final round, whatever they call it. But it's so funny that you see so much of that, and you already have so many USA guys entering. Definitely crazy. Also, so at that same notion, we are seeing a lot of like powerhouse RTCs develop where we have guys wrestling where you have like let's say the NLWC where they're getting guys like Snyder and they also have somebody like Bexad or Franklin Gomez.
Yeah.
Ohio RTC has been pretty quiet through it all. You seem pretty loyal to Ohio RTC, to Ohio in general. I saw it during the Brown season. We won't go back there. But Ohio RTC does seem a little quiet right now. What's the vibe like in Columbus at the RTC level? Like, what's your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have the tools to make it happen. I think, all those guys that had success at Ohio RTC, the same setup and tools are there that they were 5 or 6 years ago when we had a lot of guys.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times just what happens is guys get good, they get maybe offers or coaching opportunities or more money somewhere else, and they just take it. And whatever makes sense to that person, whatever they feel comfortable in their training, that's what they're going to do. But I think right now at the Ohio RTC, we're waiting on some college guys from Ohio State that want to continue their careers after they graduate.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to, I think, just hold some space for them because there is a lot more money in wrestling, but it's not infinite money.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we don't really want to. I don't think we want to, fill up those spots with a bunch of guys from other teams,
Yeah.
And then when guys graduate, they don't feel like they have a place here at home. So we want to keep those guys. They've came through our program and they know what what training looks like at Ohio State and Ohio RTC. And I think we're just trying to wait for some of those guys to graduate and then compete at the senior level.
Have you ever entertained leaving Ohio? I mean, you obviously grew up in Ohio. You went to high school, like an hour away from Columbus?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're like as Ohio as it gets. Have you ever contemplated leaving? Even just, you're starting to see some guys, I think, just want to change the scenery at times, whether they go, across the country to warm weather, whether, like you said, a coaching opportunity. Have you contemplated anything? Or are you just pretty much set Ohio?
I've definitely looked into it. I mean, a lot of people have offered me positions in other places. But when I really look at it, it's like these are the people that got me to where I am. I've had success with all these people, and I'm still having success. So when I look at other training situations, nothing is that much different, at least partner wise, than what I have
Yeah.
at Ohio State. There's a lot of depth in these weight classes at the senior level, but honestly, I think as the higher you get up in weight class, just the less and less guys compete internationally for the
Yep.
US. And so looking at other RTCs, nothing is that much different or better than what I have at Ohio State. So it doesn't make sense really for me to leave my home. My family's an hour and a half away. I grew up in Ohio. Columbus is home to me. So nothing has pulled me that greatly away from where I'm really comfortable and feel successful at.
And you have so many relationships. Like I know Dustin Myers, your strength coach, you guys have a great relationship. What
Yeah.
has that been like having those relationships that are so long that, I feel like some people only judge success or accolades based on current level or a certain tier that they kind of set in their mind. How have you've obviously had success? So I don't ask this ignorantly, but how have you defined the success you've had to where it's like, I don't need a change of scenery? Tom Ryan and Dustin Myers and all these people around you are what you need.
Yeah, I think for me, success is just competing better than you did the last time, honestly. And I think what's nice about having these long lasting relationships and you get so close to these guys is they just know so much about everything in your life.
Yeah.
So it's real easy to come back from something and be like, I don't know, this didn't really feel right. I want to change a little bit here. And they can, they just, they know you very well to kind of like either say, no, I think what we're doing is right. I think we just need to buy into it a little bit more, or okay, like, yeah, let's change something up. And I think that's where I'm at with all these guys. And I just feel really grateful for that.
Going back to the college for a bit, you did have so much success. You three-time Big Ten champion. You were in the finals all 4 years. Bo's my buddy. He's probably not as good of a friend to you. But you did have so much success there. Going back to 2020 for a minute, I'm obviously a Penn State fan. And, like not seeing Chenzo go to NCAAs in 2020 hurt me, but he was
Yeah.
even just a top contender. You were the top contender. You were 27-0 your senior year. You had just won your third Big Ten championship. And, it's funny because as time passes, like initially on the podcast, it was a lot of fun to talk about, not necessarily fun. I use that term loosely, but it was interesting to
Yeah.
talk about how people were reacting from having that kind of stolen away from you. Now there's been time removed and it's digested a little bit more. I'm curious, now we're already 3 years removed from that, which is absolutely crazy. How have those 3 years been from kind of digesting that? And, I'm sure there's a part of you that, knowing what a competitor you are, you'll probably never let some of it go, but you've
Yeah.
also, I'm sure, let a lot of it go. How has that been for you?
Yeah, man. And I mean, it's just probably the most unique experience that you could go through as an athlete. You always try to just focus on stuff you can't control. And then this thing comes on, it's like nobody can control it. It's nobody's, so I think at first I was actually just really like okay with it. Um I think I knew that I was the best in the weight class and I was gonna win. So in my mind, I was like, it's whatever. Like I'm still gonna wrestle. My career's not over. I'm gonna go do bigger and better things and just keep training. Like nothing really changed besides I didn't get my hand raised.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing that, like you said, you'll always hold on to a little piece of it. I think just, missing out on that experience of, after being there 3 times and not getting it done, missing that feeling of finally Saturday night, you win it, get your hand raised, and, you know, without a doubt, you're a national champion. I think that's the thing that will always kind of like stick with me a little
Yeah.
bit. That what if, but at the same time, going back to like can't control it. So
Yeah.
honestly, I don't think about it that much. It's a little crazy what the NCAA did after that,
Beyond crazy.
of,
Yeah.
giving everyone who got to wrestle another year, anyways.
That was just
Uh,
a slap in the face. That was the
yeah,
just the
I was
kick you when
like,
you're down.
okay, all right,
Yeah,
cool,
that
I
that
guess.
yeah, that was a joke. Um, and it's interesting too because, like I said earlier, we've been following each other for a long time, and I know one thing you're very consistent with, aside from your blind loyalty to the Browns, is your faith. And
Yeah,
I love the verse in your Instagram bio, Acts 20:24, which talks about finishing the race, completing the task Jesus gives us. I'm curious. It's funny because you talk. When I see that verse, I think very much like what you went through in 2020. Like you're still continuing the race. You're not going to pout. You're over it. I'm curious for you how important your faith's been, not just in your life, but throughout your career and the success you've had.
man. I mean, it's been everything. It completely got me through that time period in 2020. I think
Yeah.
if I hadn't been in such a strong place in my faith, that things could have turned out very different for me moving on into that Olympic year in 2020 in the senior level. But I think it's really just given me a thing to value that isn't it's the most consistent thing in the world, that
Yep.
Jesus is, my savior, and I have that constant rock in my life. So whenever something gets taken away or changed, um, it's like, man, that's just life. But I have something that is beyond that I'm striving for. And that's what I value instead of, just the accolade or getting your hand raised. It's like, okay, that sucked. Move on, keep doing what I'm
Yeah.
doing. And that was such a huge part of not only 2020, but there's just so many ups and downs in the sport of wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
So much can happen. You can do everything right, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. And especially in the senior level, you just don't get to compete as much. So when you do get to compete and you just don't have it that day or something, it can really kind of just mess with you a little bit.
Yeah.
In college, you go through the whole Big Ten season, you wrestle everybody, you can have a good Big Ten season and have a great postseason, or vice versa. You can wrestle bad all year and really pull it out at the end. But in freestyle, especially at the senior level, it's like you get everything's just about that one opportunity in June. Um, so my faith has just been a really, really good um, thing for me to just remind me of something bigger than wrestling. Yeah.
I love how Brandon Slay, he started a podcast called Greater Gold, which that's the premise for it. And
Mhm.
if he's listening, he's got to keep doing that podcast. I know he's been busy, but it's such a great premise. And it's funny you say that too, because like health and timing, I talk about it all the time on this podcast. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to hear the stories of guys like you and others and realize how much time is a factor in someone's success. And it's funny
Yeah.
because we on the surface, it seems like there's always chatter behind the scenes on maybe like it's almost like fans do this. I know it's like you put like degrees on somebody's world championship, or
Yeah.
like, man, they went through this or they went through that, or even an NCAA championship. Like you see it where you can have, Spencer, Yanni, 3-4 time NCAA champions in your weight class. And you can look at a different weight class that's pretty wide open and say, man, one of those weights was a lot harder to win than the other.
Yeah.
But the timing and health, both are very much out of your control. You can do
Mhm.
whatever you want to stay healthy, and your body can just react differently one day. And I think it's funny the number of champions of all levels that have been on this podcast that I do think use their faith to help them not only navigate the success and the highs and the lows, but to kind of be that steadfast perspective through it all. Because I imagine, like, when you have those ups and downs, Big Tens, NCAAs, I'm imagining that's what the first go to is after. Like, when you win, sometimes it's harder to kind of not be prideful or whatever. But I'm imagining like the Big Ten championship you lost. I'm imagining your faith played a huge part in that, not kind of clinging to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of that same thing. I mean, I started to really lean on it again after my sophomore year when I was supposed to win and then got upset. And I was that whole year I was just so up and then so down. I lost in the Penn State duel. We
I
lost that.
crashed my truck the way home from that. So I'll always remember that duel.
But yeah, that was just such a rough year, and I was like, this is just emotionally draining. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way this is, you know, I can't continue like this, right? I'm never gonna make it another 2 years if this is how my mental state is. So I really started to just realize how much I have to lean on, just realizing that everything that I do on the mat is just a product of what God gives me that day.
Yeah.
And it's like you're not guaranteed that God's going to give you all the strength in the world or all the endurance or anything like that. But He always gives you what you need. for that moment. And just realizing that, and just, asking him every match to just give me what he thinks I need, um, has been huge for me. So any loss or win, I try and just ask, like, whatever you're trying to show me out of this, like, show it to me and help me learn and grow from it, which has been really helpful.
Yeah, it's a great perspective. Before I want to talk Big Tens a little bit this weekend, but switching gears a little bit, or before we switch gears, you were a 3-time Big Ten champion. You know a lot about what's coming up this weekend. When you look back on that accolade, which is not something that many people can say, 3-time Big Ten champ, what do you think about the most?
Man, it was so cool. I mean, you think you growing up, it's like the Big Ten is just the conference.
Yeah.
And always, I grew up with watching guys like Jay Jaggers and Logan Stever, and even a lot of my teammates like Nate Tomasello and them. And then just to be there and be a part of that history and have success in that conference and in wrestling, is something I definitely should appreciate more than I do. I know everyone, just talks about NCAA's, but it really is like a little mini NCAA tournament
Yeah.
at Big Tens, and you wrestle those guys all year too. So I think that's the hardest part about Big Tens is you just wrestled a lot of these guys within the last 2 months, and now you have to do it again. And so I always had good success during the season, and to beat guys multiple times in that time frame is not an easy thing. And like my freshman year, I'd lost to Far twice, and so on the flip side, it's like that opportunity to kind of get a match back. So you really have to think of it as a mini NCAA's, a little jumping off point for the big tournament, and prepare for it like it's the big show, honestly.
Yeah. And initially, I wanted to do a whole Big Ten preview show. And I was looking through the weights this year. And all of a sudden, I'm going through and I'm making picks. And I'm just writing them down. And I'm like, okay, Spencer wins 25. Roman wins 33. Got to give Real Woods the advantage of 41. I start going through the weights. I'm like, okay, so the 1 seed in every weight. And I'm like, absolutely nobody wants me to sit there and say the 1 seed. But it is interesting. Like, this year especially, it seems like a lot of the weights are very chalk because we've seen the matches. And a lot of the matchups, there's definitely storylines to follow, like how healthy is Spencer Lee? Will he mage everybody? Will he, on his way to a Hodge? In some of these weights, but it's amazing how not only chalk, a lot of it looks like it could go, but how many rematches from the season there are. There's not a lot of matches it doesn't seem on the surface. It's like, ooh, we didn't get to see that. If
Yeah.
it goes chalk, I should say.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting. At least for Ohio State, we didn't wrestle Iowa this year. So any of those matchups will be very interesting to me. But I think, honestly, a big reason for a lot of the matchups being kind of like, that's probably what's going to happen, is a lot of these guys not only wrestled each other this year, but some guys, especially the top guys, are in, I don't know, their 5th or 6th year of college. So they've wrestled each other probably like, I don't know, 7 times maybe throughout their college careers. And so that takes away a little bit of the what's going to happen conversation. But yeah, like it's some weights. I think 41 is going to be very interesting. I know Real Woods is as solid as they come, and he's pretty established, but there are some young guys and just some people that can make some noise, I guess.
I think those young weights is where we're really going to see some excitement. If the seeds hold, let's say you have Brock Hardy of Nebraska and Bo Bartlett in a semi, and the winner potentially gets Real Woods, I think that's a super interesting matchup. if you have, 49 has been such a gauntlet this year with everybody just trading losses. And you have all these questions like, how healthy is Gomez? We saw him medical forfeit or injury default, I think, a couple of weeks ago. You've got Shane Van Ness, Penn State always seems to do good in March. Like, you have these younger weights I think are going to be super exciting. And I'm a Penn State fan, so obviously I'm going to say this, but I think it's Penn State's tournament to lose. But Iowa, Nebraska 2-3 could be a very, very fun team race to watch. And you can see some of those matchups, like if Peyton Robb and Kobe wrestle at 57 in a semifinal, and then Levi Haynes, Kendall Coleman in the other semi, that to me could be arguably one of the most fun weights. I'm obviously rooting for a Levi Haynes, Peyton Robb semi. I think that, or a final. I think that would be awesome. But I had tweeted out a little while ago, like, do all the 1 seeds are big favorites, or at least have a strong justification as to why. Yeah. Do you happen to have a non-1 seed favorite that you could see winning?
A little biased, but Mendez.
Okay.
I think Mendez.
He's tough.
He's the real deal. It's really impressive to see a guy right out of high school compete with the maturity that guy has. It's really cool to see. Trying to go through the weights in my head.
The biggest responses I got were Labriola. That was because I tweeted out. Labriola got a lot of responses. Who's the 2 seed? So even that's not a huge, upset. Patrick Kennedy, the 3 seed at 65, got a lot of comments.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting weight too. I mean, is Amin the 1 seed for 65? Or
65, Hamady the 1, Cam Amin the 2, Patrick Kennedy the 3, Facundo the 4.
Yeah, I think that'll be a very interesting weight. Just because, I mean, the way Hamady wrestles too is like, it's extremely fun. But just those fun matches, stuff can happen, like for anybody.
Well, and that's why I said, like, I'm absolutely rooting for chaos. I'm making no bones about it. Like, just give me chaos. And the cool thing about 65 is we did not see. So what the semis would be, if the top 4 seeds hold, would be Hamady and Facundo in the top, which we didn't see this year. And then Cameron Amin, Patrick Kennedy in the bottom, which we didn't see. So it's one of those rare weights where I don't think Cameron Amin wrestled in the Michigan-Iowa duel. And then Hamady and Facundo, I don't think Penn State and Wisconsin wrestled each other this year. So that could be a very, very fun weight. These Penn State freshmen, like Patrick Kennedy is a stud, and so is Facundo. If it was Facundo versus Kennedy, I don't know if you watched that match, but it was like 2-1 overtime win. Thrilling match that people are kind of pouting like they wanted more offense, but they're 2 young freshmen who are just getting going. That I think, like Mendez, he's so tough. I don't think he's going to beat Roman this year, but like next year, like Roman's gone, Fix is gone. Like he's great. Some of these kids coming right out of high school lately are just, it's crazy. Because I remember where I was at that point, like maturity wise. And it's funny you talk about Mendez, like maturity, because I would say the dumbest years of my life were probably like 18 to 20. Like, just if I ever looked in the mirror and said you were a loser at this age, it was 18 to 20. I didn't know any better. So it's crazy the level of maturity some of these kids have. I think heavyweight's going to be super fun too. Heavyweight's a super fun weight where you have Mason Paris, Kirk Fleet, Cassiope, Lucas Davis in the top 4, and they've all kind of traded losses over the past couple of years. Mason Paris has looked incredible this year. The kid's wrestling every opportunity he gets. I think he's got like the most wins out of all the number 1 seeds. Maybe Peyton Robb has more than him. But, Cassiope has what it takes. Kirk has what it takes. Davison's right up there. He's a stud.
Yeah, I think what'll be really interesting too is just what happens on the backside of a lot of these
Yeah.
tournaments, especially for the more open weight classes like 57 and 41. Like it's really just going to set up people either really great or really poorly at nationals. Just seeding wise. So I know, was it last year? Was last year in Nebraska at Big Tens? I want to say a lot of people either like forfeited in the final. There were a crazy.
Last year we were actually DMing about it
Yeah,
because there was I can't remember who it was, but right out of the gate last year, you started seeing the medical forfeits, the injury defaults like crazy on the backside. Because I remember I tweeted one out. I'll tell you who it is after the show because I don't want to throw him under the bus. But I had tweeted out like so and so's medical forfeiting, and you had DM me and said why, and I'm like, well, we know the answer as
yeah,
to why, but I'm really hoping we don't see a lot of that. It's also like I under here's the funny thing is if you're gonna make the argument that a lot of the athletes' responses to why people are wrestling less nowadays is because they're wrestling so much more in the youth level. So by the time you get to college, their bodies are more beat up. I get that. But if you're also wrestling less and then you're medical forfeiting, what's the point?
yeah.
Like you kind of got to pick one. Like either wrestle 30 matches and then hey, if something happens and you can't go because you've put it on the line, okay, maybe. But
Yeah.
I do think, to bring this conversation what we were talking about a few minutes ago, like the fifth, sixth year seniors, where it's like, well, no, duh. You think about how long they've been wrestling for, and with in between that and NIL, like not all these guys are coming back for the love of the sport. They're doing it
Mhm.
for NIL. They're doing it to win a national championship in March. So a
Yeah.
lot of it's very wrestlers nowadays are a lot more tactful with how they approach a
Yeah.
season. And I don't know how much of that is, for college athletes specifically, I don't know how much of that is athlete versus coach. It seems like when I'm talking to somebody and I'm like, hey, are you wrestling this weekend? A lot of times the answer seems to be, no, coach is going to have me stay home and rest. It's not like an athlete is saying, hey, I'm not going this week. And I know some coaches are more vocal. I saw Tom Ryan was responding a couple weeks ago, like, hey, if our guys are healthy, like if they're healthy enough to compete, they're competing. We're not sitting them.
Yeah.
And obviously some of the responses were, well, definitions of healthy enough to compete is a very vague term you can use. But it is, I think a lot of these coaches are trying to figure out how to get their guys to the top of the podium in March, and whether they're right or wrong, they're going to do what they think that is.
Yeah, I think it's a weird balance of like maybe a kid doesn't think he's ready, but the coach is like, no, I think you can definitely like push through this and win. Like maybe we need you or something like that. Or if a kid's like too hurt and he is a goer and is like, hey, I want to wrestle, and the coach is like, I just don't think it's smart. You're not that healthy. Maybe you need to
Yeah.
sit out this one. We don't need you for this duel. It's a very interesting balance. But I think for me, like at Big Tens, I took a lot of pride in how Ohio State did at Big Tens and how I did at Big Tens. Like my junior year or senior year, I think we took third or fourth at Big Tens, and I was like, dang, like this kind of stinks. Like we lost. Like, Michigan beat us at Big Tens, like or Nebraska beat us at Big Tens. Like what the heck? Like come on. And so for me personally, I I take a lot of pride in how Ohio State does at these tournaments. Like obviously, I was really fortunate with the teams I was on. We won my freshman and sophomore year, and that was the team winning was almost bigger than my championships. I thought it was just the coolest thing in the world that we won Big Tens. Um, and so I wish, and I don't want to speak for people, but I almost wish people took that part of the sport like a little more seriously. I like rivalries. I think they're awesome. I don't like losing. Um, and so for me, when it was the Big Tens, it was like I didn't want to lose to a team that I didn't think we should have, or then that were better than.
Yeah.
That played a big part of it for me. So like my junior or my senior year, I had like pulled an oblique or like popped a rib out of place or something. I was putting numbing patches on it, getting it shot up. Like it hurt really bad, but I was like, I want to win Big Tens. Like I
Yeah.
want to place top three. I want a medal. I want to get a team trophy. Like so stuff like that. I wish people took a little more pride in, I guess. And I think it just is way better for the sport and for the fans when you see guys out there battling just not only for their own accolades, but like, hey, I want the team to do really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that does play like a really, really big part of it.
Yeah, especially in the postseason where you said like there's a lot of team pride on what place you take and being there for your teammates. And I think some of the most fun tournaments that I've like been rooting for, like I always tell people, like I didn't really choose to become a Penn State fan. Cal was a client of mine, became a friend of mine. I started rooting for Penn State and they happened to get very good. But it was a lot
Yeah.
more fun rooting for them back then when they were like an underdog or it was more competitive. Whereas like if your team, whether you're a fan or on the teammate, if it's almost like I think I saw the odds this morning, Penn State's like minus 500 to win
Yeah.
NCAAs. It's like the team race makes it very fun.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to admit on the podcast, so I won't, that I was excited when Kyle won in 2018 in NCAAs. But as a Penn State fan, I'm sure some people were. But like that's what makes it like so fun. Like that aspect of like making it a team sport, even though it's individual sport, like there's so much fun to it when you do compete. And even your seasons, I mean, I want to say you wrestled an average, what, 30 matches?
Yeah. I was always like 27-4 or 27-3. So yeah, I was right around 30. If I didn't, I was at like U23s or something. I think
Yeah.
the year I was at U23s, maybe I missed an open tournament or two, so I was a little low on matches. But
That's
uh,
funny too. Like I was going back and forth with someone on Twitter about like number of matches this year, and they said, "Well, Yanni doesn't deserve the 1 seed because he only had 15 matches." I'm like, "Well, he missed 5 from the Cliff Keen Open because he was at the World Cup." I'm
yeah,
like, maybe a mulligan for that one. Like some of these guys, like, and I said, like Yanni's a very unique one because he's on the senior level world team. So
mhm.
I'm like, he's 100% right now focused on winning world championship and then winning an NCAA championship. So you do have some people who are like trying to curate their body for the year. And one thing I don't think people realize that I think maybe it was Kevin Dresser was explaining this to me. People often lose sight that a team has people at all different talent levels. So you might want to rest a veteran who needs it versus getting matches for a freshman who needs to build confidence. And you have different health levels. And when you have a schedule, for once you get to the senior level, you make your own schedule pretty much, or a coach is making it specifically for you. In college,
Yeah,
the entire team with people of different accolades, different talent, all the same schedule. So
yeah,
it's really not a surprise that you see lineup changes in a sport like that, where it is at the end of the year, I don't want to use the word judge, but like at the end of the year, your test is an individual championship. So of course, throughout the year, you're going to have those moments where individually something is different for one kid versus another.
yeah. Um, yeah, I totally agree, and I think I saw that play out with Snyder as he got older. I think that his senior year, I don't think he wrestled that many matches
He didn't.
year at all. Um, but then like we wrestled Michigan, and it was a very close duel, and coach was like, "Hey, we're gonna need you for this duel."
Actually,
And
he wrestled 18 matches his senior year.
what's that?
So he wrestled his second most matches his senior year.
Really? Oh, I
Be-
guess.
because, well, it makes sense. Freshman year was 30-4, but then that's also when he won the world championships. Then he was only 11-0 his sophomore year, 17-0 junior year, 17-1 senior year.
That second year, he didn't wrestle until the second half of the season. He was supposed to redshirt that year, and then they pulled him out of that.
They pulled it like mid-January. It was late.
Yeah. So a big reason for that was to get Miles to also pull his red shirt, which worked out for everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, Ohio State fans.
Yeah. But it was interesting because they were like, hey, we're going to need you for this Michigan duel. And he ended up losing to Kuhn. We still won the duel, but he ended up losing a match that he probably didn't need to wrestle or probably didn't want to wrestle. But it was cool to see him like, hey, we need you. All right, I'll be there. And so it's just, I don't think the fans will never know what everything that's going on, especially, just in people's lives and the situations. And that there's always going to be that struggle of like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
And I wish everyone could see behind the curtain, but at the same time, it's like, how much does the fan need to know? Like, just show up and cheer people on. Like, it is frustrating, but to a point, it's like,
the way I've said it to a few of my athletes who are clients is, as an athlete, I think the curtain is up to you how much you want to open it and let people in behind it. There's definitely injuries, relationships, all sorts of stuff that happen that normally is nobody's business. I do think that for especially an athlete who wants to grow an audience, grow a fan base, the more you do share, the more you are transparent, I think it's more of an opportunity to build that loyalty. Like if a coach tells an athlete, hey, you're not wrestling this weekend, I don't think the athlete has to go, like a college athlete has to go on Twitter and say, hey guys, just so you know, I'm not wrestling this weekend. But I do think if they do that, it builds a little bit of a level of loyalty, in the transparency. But I definitely think wrestling is a unique situation where I think you see more often I think you see a huge lack of communication on one end more than like over communication. And there's also some old school thinking where it's people trying to game. I'm not going to tell you this because there's like the gamification of it, which I think is not unique to wrestling. It's most sports. But I do think there's an opportunity if the athletes communicate more. Like I've always said, if you're not asking the fan for anything, you don't owe them anything. If you're saying, come to my camp, buy my shirt, come sit in the seats at this event, well, then you should give them the benefit, the luxury of, following you. But it's not a black and white answer for everyone. I think it's very much up to the athlete, their life, what they're comfortable with, because it is very easy to get lost when, like, I tell some people who struggle with it, don't consume it, create it. Like if you're putting out the content, that's one thing. If you're putting it out there, then reading your rankings and what so-and-so thinks and so-and-so thinks. Like, I know I'm even careful when I put something out because I know I offend people, like wrestlers, because if you give one person praise, another person takes it as a dig, or if you cover something. So it's not black and white. I have to, my little audience, I still have to like not read every comment when it's like, why is he doing this? Why is he saying that? You shouldn't do this. It's like, okay, calm down, buddy. I don't know how we digress to that, but wrapping this up, Big Ten should be fun. I am rooting for absolute chaos. Absolutely. I am rooting for like a number one seed to go down in the first round. I'm rooting for also this. It's funny. Big Tens is obviously, we're probably both in line with like being Big Ten followers above any other conference. But it's starting to get very interesting. Some of these other conferences and their weights, like I think the ACC Championship is 157. You have Austin O'Connor, Bryce Andoni, and Ed Scott. That's going to be great. You have the Pac-12s where at 165, you have David Carr and Keegan O'Toole in a potential rematch in the finals. Some of these conferences are really starting to build up where I put on it's on Baschamania.com, but it's also on Rokfin, where like I put all the different seeds, all the schedules, all the streams, because it is getting to that point to where number one, every single conference championship is very easy to stream. You might have to get another service, but they're all there. You can watch them all. And there's that talent depth where it's growing. And I think I saw like Andrew Spey at Flow put something about the 157 at ACC championships and how deep it is. And it's super cool. So we're, Big Tens for us is the holy grail, but there's a lot of great conference wrestling this weekend that I think is going to be very exhilarating. If you had to pick a dark horse for Big Tens, a true dark horse, and not like a 2 seed, like again, Levi Haynes is a big one, Labriola is a big one that people are picking, and it's like, okay, those aren't really dark horses, but I said non-number one, they're not number one. Who would you pick if you had to pick a dark horse? Not even to win, just to have a very good tournament.
I mean, all the guys that pop into my head are Ohio State guys, but
fair.
But yeah, I don't know. I think the one guy that sticks out to me is Patty Gallagher. He's had so many like close matches, and he just couldn't figure out how to win that toss up match. And I think what we saw in the last 2 weeks is he's kind of finally starting to figure out how to compete in those really close matches and just stay level headed at the end of those matches. He almost beat Peyton Robb at the home.
It was a super close match.
Yeah, he had that good match against Michigan State, or Northwestern. So I think his trajectory is just straight up from here. He's had a kind of a tough season. He's real low ranked. I don't know if he'll win it, but I do think he's in a good spot right now to where he could place really high at Big Tens and get a good seat at NCAA.
Yeah, his ranking I don't think is adequate for his talent. Like I think a lot of times where rankings are fun is if you don't follow something too closely, you can kind of get a rough gauge for where that person is. But like I thought that was one of Levi Haynes' best wins. He majored him, and I said, and if you just looked at the ranking, you're like, oh, Levi's got better wins than that. But like, no, Patty Gallagher is a bad dude. Like to I think it was like 14-5 or something. He's definitely talented. A couple names that stick out to me that I think to watch for, like not a top 4 guy. I think Lenny Pinto, Nebraska, he's a stud. He's a 7 that could wreak havoc. I think, saying a 7 could wreak havoc isn't a huge whatever, but still 7, I think he's dangerous. I don't know what it is, but Brody Teske, I feel like has had a very interesting year where he's had a very interesting entire college career.
Yeah.
Between, starting at Penn State, going to UNI, going to Iowa. He's got the talent though to be dangerous. So wouldn't put it past him to have a great tournament. There's some of these guys too, like Braxton Amos, who are just so talented. He's an 8 seed. Like, some of these guys can just, I don't want to say turn it on because it's not that easy where it's like, oh, just turn it on and go.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have that kind of talent, that if all of a sudden they go on a run, it's not a huge, like, where did that come from?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the tricky thing is, the ranking might be justified or the seed might be justified. But
yeah,
if you look at all the matches, they might have lost all their losses might be with like 2 points.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So it's like you just never know when something's going to click for that guy, even though it's like their ranking isn't, unjustified or they're not getting like screwed over or anything. But yeah, like you said, they definitely have the talent Um, I love Braxton. I hope he does have a good tournament.
Hey,
Um,
he's a good dude. Gallagher at
yeah,
12 is good. I do this NCAA. I don't know if you call it fantasy, whatever you do, but you basically pick a guy. You buy in. So I guess it's like fantasy sports. You buy into a pool and you pick 1 through 10. You got to pick a guy at each weight, and you can only pick one seed, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4. So you basically pick 10 guys, a 1 through a 10 seed. And it's tough
yeah,
because I won it in 2021, and it's usually like I had Shane Griffith, who was like an 8 or a 9.
hmm
Well, Alex Marinelli getting hurt, a lot of weird things happened that year
yeah,
where it's fun. I gotta text my guy and see if he's doing it for Big Tens, because that'd be fun. If we went as low as 12, I'd pick Patty Gallagher. I think with some of them you can pick like you got to pick a 10 seed. I think you can pick like a 10 through 15 maybe or something.
yeah, yeah.
But
That sounds actually really fun.
it's super fun. We do it every year for NCAAs. I'll try to get you into it this year.
Okay.
But yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm hoping it doesn't go chalk, and I'm hoping there's not a bunch of medical forfeits. I just want to see some good wrestling. I feel like wrestling is due for a great postseason. Just like chaos, wrestle through pain. Like
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, I think it will, man. The postseason's always crazy. Something always happens. I'll be there. I'm driving up tomorrow. So hopefully I'm gonna have some popcorn and watch some good wrestling.
I want it to go. My problem is especially as all the talent grows at different conferences, not being able to watch other conferences. That's
Yeah,
the one negative with going, where it's like it's hard enough to follow one tournament like that in its entirety, let alone there's all this other stuff going on. So I'm gonna be having all the different screens going. It should be good. Um, for you, competition wise, what's next? Open?
yeah. U.S. Open.
Is it just? Are you doing Pan Ams this year? Do you know yet?
So at the weights where there's no medalist, the winner of the Open goes to Pan Am's. So if
That's
you win
right.
the Open, you basically get on a plane the next day.
Yeah, it's right after that, isn't it? Like the next week or something. Yeah, and if you win the Open, you go right to Final X, right? If you're
Yes.
yeah.
So I kind of like. At first, I didn't like it, but the more I thought about it, I think the new system uh, is good. Just because the U.S. Open or Senior Nationals or whatever they call it now, it just wasn't a very good tournament anymore.
No,
Nobody
it fell off big time for a while.
nobody really went to it because there was no point. It was like, oh, I'm gonna go wrestle these guys at the Open. Maybe I'll sit or get the 1 seed. You didn't even sit in the finals of the trials anymore. You just got the
Yeah.
one, and it's like, oh, I'll just rest. You just wrestle everybody again, like a month later. So
It's
me, I was like, I'm not going to that. Like,
it was very fun. Like I started going to the Open like 2017, maybe 2018.
yeah,
It was so fun for a couple years, and then it just kind of fell off. I love putting a priority on the Open. I wish I could go this year. I can't because baby number 2 is due like that week.
oh,
So I don't think thanks. I don't think I can make it happen. My only concern, but I do think the pros outweigh the cons. My only concerns is it's weird to me on the surface that a tournament that has so much weight is an open tournament that absolutely anybody can wrestle.
yeah,
That's my only qualm, is because it's an open tournament, you could get people who try dangerous stuff, aren't safe. But overall, I think the pros outweigh the cons. That would be my one, like, can we like put some kind of qualification on this so you don't have,
yeah.
Joe hopping off a roof and the next day he's at the Open?
I literally wrestled like a 45-year-old, 50-year-old dude one year.
I know. I got to be careful talking about him because so I mentioned him and like his daughter tweeted like the next day, like, that's my dad or something.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
like, I can't remember if it was to my tweet or somebody else, but I'm not being disrespectful. I'm like, it's just funny that
yeah.
there's like,
He's a nice guy, but it was very interesting. I was like, wait, who do I have? Like, okay,
yeah.
all right. Like,
And like,
if
I guess it's cool. Like, I mean,
like you said, I was in my head, I was like, there's literally only a downside for me here. Like,
yeah.
just thinking like you got to get on top and just turn him and tech him right away so he doesn't, I don't get hurt. That was my biggest fear in that match, was just like something weird happening.
Yeah, that's my only qualm. I love the importance that they're putting on the Open. The Open is like NCAA is the tournament to go to every year. Like you see everybody, there's nothing like it. But Vegas in the Open in Vegas in April is like the diehards tournament. Like it's where you go and like you're all going down to the casino floor in between rounds, or every coach is there. You're hanging out. It's a fun time. So
yeah.
All right, man. Well, any final words before I let you go?
Go Bucks.
All right. Hey, I offered, so I'm not going to refute that. I will say go Nittany Lions. I am rooting for the Lions. But yeah, this has been fun. If you guys are listening, go follow Kollin. He's on Twitter, Instagram. I'll link it all up below so you don't got to try to spell it all out. And we'll do this again soon, man. I hope you guys have I hope the Browns have a successful combine week this week.
I wouldn't count on it, but we'll see.
But I could still wish it for you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, man. See ya.
And the beat goes on.